So what's going on? My name is Bran, and I'm joined by Marley.
Hello.
And Carson.
Hello.
And welcome to the Checkpoint, the bi-weekly podcast series on the Geek XP that was started a while back by Carson and my good friends Marley and Nate on the Save Station. And today we're talking about game developers overpromising and under-delivering when it comes to their games. But before we get into that, as is tradition, let's talk about really briefly about the games that we're playing. Marley and Carson, for the life of me, I can't recall what games you're playing right now.
We're playing this really cool little indie game. It's made by these great, this little Japanese studio.
Yeah.
You might have heard of them. It's called Nintendo.
I've never heard of them.
And their game is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I think it's like the first or second game in the franchise.
Now, you can customize your Zelda in this game.
Yeah, we're both playing Breath of the Wild. When I need Breath of the Wild breaks, I'm playing Shovel Knight Treasure Trove.
Oh, nice.
But it's just been so much Zelda.
Yeah.
I wake up and I try to play a little, and then when I get home from work, I rush through whatever I have to do so I can just play. I haven't gotten to bed at a reasonable hour since it's come out.
Nice.
Yep. Same here. Ever since it came out on March 3rd, I've been playing every day, and the late nights have ranged from like 2 a.m. to like 3:30 a.m. at night.
The other day, I got stuck on a boss fight, and I had to be up at 6 in the morning. I stayed up till 1:30 till I beat him, and it's just so good.
I told myself last night I would go to bed at 1, and then a bunch of there's just so much side questing and fun little characters to find that slowly it turned into 3:30.
Yeah.
And then I woke up this morning at around 10:30, and then now I'm here doing this. And probably after this, I'm gonna be going back to Breath of the Wild and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things where it's 15 minutes turns into 30, and that 30 minutes turns into 5 hours.
Well, it's always, I'll just turn in this quest. And then it's, I'm already in this general area. Let me just pick up the quest in this area. And then it's this one quest I already have 30% of the items I need. That's only 70%. That's practically 50%, which is, I'm halfway there. So great.
Just to not to take up the segment too long, but the world is just so much fun to explore.
Mm-hmm.
They've just crafted the best open world I've had the pleasure of exploring in a video game. Even if I'm not fighting something, I'm just having fun hiking.
Yeah.
And seeing I want to see if I can climb that thing with as much stamina as I've got.
Yep.
And when you can't climb it, you're like, I'm going to find a way to do it.
Yep.
Whether they want me to or not.
Yeah, you can literally climb anything, and if you see a point, you can go there and climb it, which is a very common saying in a lot of video games. Some don't deliver. We'll get to that later. But, so I've been playing Breath of the Wild. I was playing a little bit of Overwatch probably 2 weeks right before Breath of the Wild came out. I haven't touched Overwatch since. Right now, Breath of the Wild is the only game I have on my Switch, but I would like to get some other games, maybe Fast RMX, which is a Wipeout / F-Zero kind of mix racer. So I think that's it for me. What have you been playing, Brandon?
I was playing Doom for a while, which I love, and I'm at the tail end of it. I'm so close to finishing it, but really it's been Overwatch. I caught the Overwatch bug again, and I am in the middle of the slow but steady crawl back out of gold. I got placed because I ended last season because I took off for a month, and my rating decay and my personal skill decay was quite noticeable. So I ended the season in low gold. So when I did my placement matches, I got placed in 1800, so I was in silver. So I climbed out of there, and now I'm working my way back up. But I'm really enjoying Overwatch. I'm super hyped for Orisa. I'm even more excited for the Winston buff. Praise the maker.
What are they doing to him exactly?
Because before his barrier, when he puts it down, his bubble, the cooldown of 13 seconds doesn't start until the bubble either dies or times out, which has a time limit of 5 seconds. So you're basically working with a 20-second cooldown on his bubble, which only has 600 HP. But now what it's going to happen is that the cooldown starts as soon as you put it down. So now you
That's
effectively, if the bubble lasts for 5 seconds, you essentially have an 8-second cooldown on the bubble, which is
That's
great
awesome.
because his barrier is literally his life. It makes a difference between life and death since he has really no other damage mitigation, and his jump is still on a cooldown. So it's good for him. So. And yeah, so I'm enjoying the game. The meta is in a better place than it's been in a long time. We're out of triple tank, which means Winston can flourish. Bastion was dominating for a while, which was scary, which made Winston difficult. But now he's in a more comfortable place. He's not as much of a troll pick anymore. People don't hate you if you pick Bastion because he's like he's survivable.
What about Sombra? I want to see her get some real
she's
use.
coming back a lot because with Bastion being more prominent, her hack keeps him out of turret mode. And EMP, when people are turtling up with behind these barriers, especially now with Orisa coming in with even more barriers, EMP breaks barriers. And so being able to go in, all these barriers are gone. That opens up the playing field a lot. And now they're also buffing her where her Translocator has now a 4-second cooldown. She can use it a lot more. When she comes out of stealth, she'd be been here all along, but you could hear it from across the map. They're reducing that distance, so you have to be within 15 meters of her to hear that. So if she stealths in the right spot, she can totally sneak up on you. And then now in the PTR, they've added a thing that when she hacks a health pack, her and her allies can see it through walls. Which I was playing on the PTR, and we didn't have a healer, and I was playing Orisa, and we were holding down the objective on King of the Hill and Ilios, and I was super low, and then I turned and I see this big health pack glowing through the wall. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. And we just want to fight. So I walked over there, healed up, and then came back. It was awesome. Wow. So that's really useful. Because, it's the same thing, but, before it was super reliant on communication with your team. And if someone's not in voice chat, it doesn't do any good. And even if you tell them...
no one ever speaks.
Yeah. And even if you tell people, there's so much happening in an Overwatch map for other people to try to keep track of which health pack they think they remember you describing. It's having it as a visual cue is so much better, so that people feel that they appreciate Sombra's contributions to the team, because her damage is a good Sombra player. For a lot of time, it's imagine what you could do on Tracer. She just has better damage output, better mobility, better outs, and so Sombra is gonna be a lot more prominent, especially coming up in this upcoming patch. With Orisa and just with more barriers, Sombra becomes much more viable.
And when is that dropping? Do we know?
We don't know. Probably another week.
Okay.
I know it got delayed a little bit, so I think we were looking at 2 weeks about a week ago. So I think we have a week left before that new stuff goes live. But yeah,
cool.
Overwatch has been taking up most of my attentions in terms of gaming. I can't afford to
play Sun and Moon.
I need, seriously, I need to pick that up. It's hard because I used to commit Pokemon time to my commute. But now my commute is 5 minutes, and I have to drive. So it's hard. When I'm home, I want to play Overwatch or do something else.
Yeah.
So that's what we've been playing for now. We're going to take a quick little break, you guys. So if you need to step away, use the bathroom. I mean, this is a podcast episode, so you can pause it whenever and go to the bathroom whenever the hell you want. But when we get back...
Or listen to us while you pee.
Yeah. I'm not your dad. I can't tell you what to do. But we'll come back and we'll talk about the way game developers sometimes... overpromise and then underdeliver when it comes to their games, and we'll talk about the worst developers for this and some of the developers that do a good job of making sure they promise and deliver the same thing. So we'll catch you guys in just a second. All right, geeks, we're back, and we are jumping into our topic about when game developers overpromise and underdeliver. Now, there's a wide range of types of this sort of deal where maybe during an E3 Expo or some other convention, they'll show a gameplay trailer, and maybe the game looks really pretty, and there's all these particle effects and other dynamic physics systems in the game to make it look really exciting to explore this world. But then when you get the game, it's not quite as pretty. There isn't all these effects. And that can also range to just content in the game, things that developers promise will be in the game that are either in there and underwhelming and not really what they promised, or completely absent at all. And so we're going to go over those right now. Carson, you have an example of the second part which I think is the more glaring of the two in terms of heinous acts of lies. But yeah, Carson, why don't you dive into it?
Sure. So there's a little game called Destiny. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but came out in 2014.
Another small indie game.
Yeah,
Small
another
studio.
another small indie game from a small studio named Bungie. Never heard of them probably, but yeah, Destiny. Up front. I have to say, Destiny was a really fun game to play. I really enjoyed their gameplay.
Mechanically, it was solid.
Yeah.
I mean, at launch, me and you both sunk a decent amount of time into it. We
Yep.
were on different platforms, but
Yep, I put a lot of hours, probably 100+ hours into Destiny. I was like fully into this game when it was out. I had a blast with it. The story was interesting, but ultimately not that great, and that's where
those grimoire cards, man. You want the real story? Get on that website.
So that's where I like to segue into the promises that were kind of given to us early on. And what they did early with Destiny's development is they promised a lot of things. And that was, one thing was they promised from an opening like cutscene in the world, one dev was kind of quoted as in saying, "Oh, you see that mountain over there? You can go to it."
You could not.
And then
cue
The phrasing for every open world game.
Cue
Like,
the Arrested Development narrator. You couldn't.
And lo and behold, you get into the game. It's the starting area, of course. I see that same mountain, and I was like, "Oh, what do you know? There's a giant ravine that has just a kill box sitting at the bottom of it that you can't go any further. Hello, lonely mountain. I'm never gonna see you again."
yeah, you were pretty much regulated to zones
Yes.
in
Yep.
that game.
Not an open world game.
And not just
which,
any zones, the same 4 zones.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again.
Over and over again. Which, yeah, that quickly got old. But, yeah, it's this weird, like, moment in gaming. We had, like, this, like, there's a lot of open world games coming out, and then a lot of devs, like, promising, like, almost open world games. But what was weird about Destiny was they never really were saying it was an open world game, per se. And, jeez. Sorry, Zoe's getting in the way. Might have to edit that out. Here, hold on, we're getting Zoe out of here. Alright, I'm gonna just timestamp this real quick.
Yeah, sure.
I'm gonna get a piece of
We're
paper.
like at 3 minutes, 50 seconds right now.
Yeah.
I would have let her been, but she was real close to knocking over Carson's very expensive Link statue.
Okay. So, as I was saying, yeah, Destiny, these open world games, and Destiny was never touted as an open world game, but it was more of like a shooter MMO, kind of. That's what they were saying. It was a mix of. But then all of a sudden, this one dev in the interview was like, "Oh yeah," really like touting it as almost like open world-ish. And that's what I don't want to see, is almost like blatant lies coming from a dev. And I know there was a lot of like weirdness with Destiny. Like, I think there was some publisher interference.
There was
and
like
stuff.
publisher. There was like writers got the writer from the Halo franchise who had been working on the game since the beginning got like fired, and so they had to like. There was a lot of weird chicanery behind the scenes where like they had this.
Yeah, there's a great Kotaku article about like
the game that
all the shenanigans that went down. I mean, if you Google Destiny Kotaku article, it'll be the first thing that comes up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is really relevant. You know, it's really visible in vanilla Destiny. Was that there was a story there. There's this story. I know it's there, but it's just like it's behind this wall that never gets broken. Like
Destiny, vanilla Destiny felt like a puzzle that was missing a couple pieces. Like there's definitely like the pieces definitely fit, but there were like big chunks of it missing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it was the story,
and
was
for whatever
short,
reason,
it's not well explained. It doesn't feel satisfying at all. There's so many elements that are presented without really, the proper introduction or even a resolution. We don't figure
which
out...
was another thing they promised, was like this big sprawling sci-fi epic.
Yeah, which we were expecting because it was like from the producers of Call of Duty and the writers of Halo. So we were expecting Call of Duty gameplay with a epic, space opera story like Halo. And
Yep.
Halo's not a space opera, but so we came into this thing, and then the story mode just ends, and then we have to wait years after poor souls like Carson pay out their ass for this DLC, and then Taken King comes out, which is still wasn't what they initially promised, but if you wanted like a complete package of what at least a portion of what was promised for at least a semblance of a story, that was it. But it took years down the road, and that's when I picked up Destiny, was when the Taken King came out. And I paid for the game once. Carson had to pay for the game like 3 times.
Yeah. Yep. Another quick point of kind of controversy was, the Queen DLC. What was that called again?
I don't remember.
The Queen that she had like purple hair of the Awoken.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
There was that DLC with her. That was touted as being part of the main game from like early stages. And like there's definitely the plan was, I think, to have like all this in like the Taken King and stuff. I don't think was supposed to be DLC from like the original concept of it. And I think we saw trailers with this Awoken Queen and stuff like that. And that was supposed to be part of the main story in the game and stuff, not be DLC. But lo and behold, when launch day came, and then a few months later, DLC, and then they had this DLC stuff coming. And just like Brandon said, best time to get into Destiny was Taken King. Because you get the full package
now, I had a
right
blast
there.
with Taken King. Like, because mechanically,
so
because that's the thing, because like mechanically, that is a very fun game to play.
Yeah.
Like, it's super fun. Like, I dove into
the
PvP.
loop is super satisfying.
Yeah, I'd never gotten into like PvP with like shooter games before, like with the exception of like Transformers War for Cybertron, which is like a third person perspective shooter game.
Yeah.
But I love the PvP for Destiny. I got super into it. I liked getting the ships, and I started doing raids. And like we had a group of friends, Marley, that we were playing with regularly on PlayStation 4, and we had a blast. Like that was the most fun I'd have with a group of other players, where like 1 or 2 people would be online regularly, and we'd group up and we'd do a strike or whatever. But at the end, that can only take you so far. If you're a player who is just like a COD player who just enjoys doing the matchmaking and just enjoys that, then Destiny gives you all that you need. But the issue is when they promise certain things that bring in different kinds of players. They promise the things that is the reason why people play World of Warcraft, the reason why people play Skyrim. They want to immerse themselves in what looked to be a really well-developed and well-crafted world, which I think it was. The Kotaku article mentions that the Awoken Queen's like advisor guy had a different name. He was like the Raven, and he was this really prominent character who was uncovering the secret of the Traveler, which was actually like this entity that feeds on worship. And the concept being is that it would go to systems, provide for all of these lesser entities, and then bring the darkness, and then they would worship it more and more. It would, then it would get destroyed, and then it would go to a different like universe, and it was just like, and that was this huge thing that they just, and then it all gets scrapped because like the Traveler, they talk about it nonstop in the fucking game, but like
nothing
happens with it. Nothing at all.
It's just hanging out there.
Yeah. So I think that's a good example, but we've gone on to that diatribe long enough. I'm gonna briefly go over. In terms of not exactly a game per se, but console promises, and this is a visual thing. If you guys remember, back in 2013 during E3, the Xbox One demos that they had, some photos started going around of the maintenance staff going to fix one of the demo stations, and underneath the cabinet where the station was not an Xbox, but a high-end PC running Windows. And so Xbox One was already in the like a publicity like shithole from all the chicanery that they were doing in terms of renting
always
games,
online
used games, their live client, their all of these things. And then this comes up, and then it really makes us question, okay, like how much can we even take for granted in terms of like what can the system actually do? Because when it comes to developers promising all these things in terms of graphical stuff, there's a bit of wiggle room there where I understand like presentation means a lot. If you have 2 games and one of them shows you a very honest look of what the game will probably look like on launch, and then another game which polishes it. It doesn't matter if one is more honest, because more people will buy the game that looked cooler because they won't know until they already have it. Because people will still pre-order before they even know what's in a game, which I think is sort of... It's a dangerous place for us to be in as consumers, that we will fork over a bunch of money for something that we've never seen actual content of on retail. We just go off of the promises, which are often skewed at best. And so...
E3 is a weird thing because it's like... I think the nature of like streaming culture like gives gamers an insight into it. And so there's this kind of thought amongst a lot of people that it's, you know, it's for us. Like, and I certainly think that too. But E3 is a business expo.
Mm-hmm.
And really they're trying to appeal to like Walmart execs and Target execs, you know, people who just order supply and people who don't really know anything about games. And so you show off like the shiniest new version of your thing, whether or not that's what it's going to actually look like, because that's what's going to get all those suppliers to buy your product. Obviously the downside of that is that very rarely do those games ever actually end up looking like that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like this weird middle ground that needs to be found that no one's just hasn't discovered it yet.
What gets me is I feel like a lot of these games actually look really good just when on their final versions and stuff. And these like execs or whatever, I'm not super in tuned with that side of the gaming industry or anything, but if I had to guess, these execs probably don't really care too much about like how good the game looks, because they probably don't know like technical specifications about games like anti-aliasing, bump mapping, texturing and stuff. I guarantee you they don't know that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But when I look at Destiny, like it had visual downgrades as well. When they had a trailer, they had a lot more foliage and stuff like that. And then the final game didn't have quite as much foliage. That was the main thing I saw. Maybe the lighting was a little bit less dynamic than the trailer. But to me, Destiny still looks really good. And I think what needs to happen is don't worry about the high-end PCs really pushing it. I don't think it's worth getting potentially gamers all up in a huff about it and stuff like that, feeling like they've been betrayed. I think just show the game as it is, and these execs will still be impressed because the games look good in my opinion. Like, well, yeah, I don't know what you guys think.
Well, the thing is, like, cool, you got a bunch of targets to get to supply copies of your game. That's not going to do you any good if the gamers aren't going to come out and buy them.
Yeah, well, I mean, because things because Ubisoft to me is a good example of a company that will very regularly show off like a gameplay trailer where there's all these lighting effects. They have this awesome like sound that makes the world feel very rich and lived in, and then there's a video going around of like the Ubisoft downgrades, and for things like Watch Dogs in particular. The Division,
real bad.
Rainbow Six Siege, where in their gameplay trailers they show a lot of stuff. Like I remember for Watch Dogs we had dynamic rain, wind, like the sound, just like going into buildings, like felt like he walks into a cafe and there's all these people talking, there's music playing, there's a news station going, and things like that. Like the club that he goes into, it feels very much like, wow, this feels like a world, and that's what people get invested in. And, the Division, they have this really cool map, the way that the PvP system works, the way that, engaging into combat encounters works, Assassin's Creed, a lot of environmental stuff. They show all these things, and for me, like, the big thing when I saw with the comparison with Rainbow Six Siege was just, like, the environmental lighting was this, there was this huge discrepancy. And I think, like you said, I don't mind if it looks a little bit worse, but I'm also okay with prettying up the initial trailer, because it's sort of like this unspoken rule, I feel like, at these presentations, where because if once one person does it and they have a trailer that looks prettier than probably the final game will look, they're not going to get any penalty for that until after the game has already been sold. Like pre-order,
that's true.
Pre-orders still dominate most of these initial retail sales. So it's all about the presentation at the beginning. because for a lot of these projects, unfortunately, it's just about the pay stub at the end.
Sure.
So I'm okay with making the presentation look better. My issue is when there's such a large discrepancy between what is shown visually and what is delivered, because for a lot of these games, it's staggering. Like a lot. Like I think Watch Dogs in particular is just like, if you're gonna show it off, like because now they started doing things where like they'll say like actual footage from the game versus in-game engine footage, which to me is a big deal, because like when you say actual game footage, that to me is like, okay, this is what it's gonna look like when I pick up the controller on launch day and play this game. When it says in-game engine, like I remember when they were developing Dragon Age Inquisition, they showed a trailer that was like in-game engine footage, which didn't say game footage, and it was using Frostbite, and it was really, really pretty. But during that whole trailer, I was like, this is really cool. I believe this is the engine, but I was able to go into that knowing like this is really neat, but this is not what the game is going to look like. The discrepancy was there, but there was an understanding of it's like, this is what this engine is capable of. You can expect some scenes to look sort of like this, but it's not going to be exactly the same. Where I think it's forgivable is like CD Projekt Red, The Witcher 3. Their gameplay trailers were stunning, absolutely gorgeous, crazy flame effects, awesome like dynamic systems for their plants and foliage moving around in weather. And when it was released on like PS4 and even ultra graphics on PC, it wasn't exactly the same. But to me, the discrepancy wasn't so large, because at this point we're also sort of desensitized to it. Like we sort of expect this downgrade.
Yeah.
Well, CD Projekt Red, I also remember them being very forward about it. Mm-hmm. Like after their E3 trailers came out, I remember like, I forget if it was the head of the studio or one of the like producers on the game or something, said like, listen, all these other games are showing trailers like this. We have to do it too.
Yep.
Like,
and
it's just the nature. It's the nature of the business.
They pushed back release again and again, which to me speaks well of them, because like they were forward about that, and then they weren't willing to release the game before it was ready. Because like I think that it would have made that discrepancy even worse if they released it during their initial date. Because I think what was the final pushback? It was a couple months, if not a year. Kyle would know for sure.
Yeah, I think it was a few months. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
And so like I'm totally fine with that, which is it's part of the reason why I love Overwatch so much, is because of Blizzard's. They've been so forthcoming with everything from development to updates and balance. And so when CD Projekt Red is like that, to me that it's just like, okay, I trust them that when they show me this stuff and promise stuff, it will be in the game.
Yep.
And so in terms of like graphical stuff, I would say that there's some forgivable wiggle room in there when the discrepancy isn't too great. But the big issue is like with Destiny, and with I think will be our final big topic for this, which is a more recent example of this, is when you promise content that is either not in the game very much at all or not present whatsoever.
I've got a...
does Marley want to lead off on that real quick?
So, originally, I was going to talk about Fable 3.
Oh.
But then I remembered Peter Molyneux has an even more egregious sin against gamers. So, I don't know if you guys remember. This is really bad because it directly hurt the community. So, with the advent of Kickstarter, a lot of studios have started using it to fund their games. Peter Molyneux had a plan for this game called Goddess that I got really excited for. He originated the whole like God game genre, so I was super excited for this game. He promised, it was going to be this dynamic, always kind of online and connected game where each player was a god of like a different region, and you could guide a civilization from like the Stone Age all the way to the modern age, and then you could travel out into the world and you could encounter other players' countries or like lands, and you could challenge them, and you could become the civilization, like the god for their civilization, and take it from them, and then they'd have to start over. There was going to be one player who was like god of the entire world, and he was gonna like reign supreme, and every month people could challenge him for leadership.
Dude.
And
that sounds real quick, that sounds super like Peter had a great idea.
Yeah.
But I feel like it was really high up there, you know what I'm saying?
And that's and the thing was I was like, all right, these sound lofty, but I was like, this is the genre that you created. You know it, like, you delivered Black and White and Black and White 2 are both really great games. I was like, all right, like, and at that point, the only game of his that I really had any beef with was Fable 3, and I was like, I still trust you. So I backed Goddess.
Oh, man.
So they get the beta out. Base beta's fun. They go dark for, I want to say, a year and a half almost.
Oh, that's a long time.
There's no dev updates. There's no messages from him. He promised like a one player one in his other weird gaming experiment. He was going to be the god of the world, the first god of the world, and receive this huge cash prize. The guy never got his money.
Oh.
He never got to be the god. They never even implemented that feature. The game never went online. There were like lobby matches you could do, but that was it. There was no like huge interactive world between players and shaping it like they promised.
Mm.
And then there were just like huge chunks of the game. Like you got to a certain point in civilization and your society just stopped advancing.
Wow.
And to me, like, what makes that really, really bad is, like, you know, Kickstarter money comes directly from your fans. Mm-hmm. And that it's, like, a new era of, like, over-promising, but it really hurting.
Mm.
Yeah, the one I was thinking of a really egregious sort of offender in this is Hello Games No Man's Sky, which...
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy.
I was going to talk about that, but I was like, I don't know, maybe.
I mean, this one is pretty recent, and this is sort of like multifaceted, but I'll first sort of deal with the huge promises that were made and things that were directly said from quotes from the developer or mentioned. Things like making fleets, you know, going into battles, you know, freighters and factions and like the faction wars that you could do, resources and, you know, being able to scan planets from orbit and, you know, the same thing is like an infinite, like, actively generated universe that's constantly being updated and changed. And what ends up happening is the factions don't really matter at all. They don't interact. If you're getting attacked by pirates and your faction is like literally right there, they won't do anything about it. The fleets will consist of up to like 3 to 4 ships maybe. The freighters don't move even though their engines are running. They're completely static, and you get this still lifeless world that was a lot more homogenized than they really promised. Like the crafting, like for ships, instead of having different types of ships for different play styles, whether you want to be like a pirate or like a soldier or an explorer or a scientist, all the ships basically do the same thing. So that all gets focused into one thing. Resources are super easy to get, and so trading doesn't really matter at that point because these other resources are super easy to get because it doesn't matter which planet you're on. They promise certain things like being able to land on asteroids, being able to make stations. Actually, I don't know about that last one. But all
they promised stations and they weren't there at launch. They came in a post-game update.
Mm-hmm. And they have all these things that they promise, and I will totally 100% say that the developers of No Man's Sky, the people at Hello Games, definitely overpromised. But I also will say that there's an element of overhype that we as a gamer community lended to this game. That they would say things, and sometimes they would be vague, sometimes they'd be a little bit more specific, and that's where these like offenses are really glaring. But the gaming community also really hyped up this game. People were sort of postulating and theorizing about what this kind of game would be like, what they could possibly do. And eventually down that little like phone tree, as people like are making posts and then they see that post, they may just read the title and then they talk to their friends, is that yes, there was a difference between what was promised and what was delivered, but there's also a huge difference in what we expect versus what can realistically be delivered in a game. Because that's something we also have to remember in terms of whether it's a graphical discrepancy or a content thing, is that, you know, just mechanical limitations to consoles and games. For a game to be actively rendering in real time and responding to inputs from the player, there's a certain like give and take for what can be actively running in terms of how many systems can be actively running at the same time. What particles are rendering versus how far away can things start getting cut off and not be rendering. All these things that have to be considered, and so we have to make sure we maintain realistic expectations. And I think that also needs to apply to the developers who, you can be a game designer but not know the hard math and science of programming. And so I think if there's a greater understanding both in the community and within the game developing world, it would prevent, because I'm sure there have been instances during one of these like press conferences or showings where one of the producers or whoever their face is to stand on stage, grin like an idiot, and talk about their game, that they say something that they might have heard one of the developers maybe like saying in a meeting, like, hey, what if we add this? And they take that bit of information and they present it as fact. And I'm sure the game designers in the back, like behind stage, are like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, we literally can't do that. But like, they can't do anything about that. This person just stood on stage and made it fact for all of these, gamers.
Well, I know, to bring it back to Goddess for a second, I know that, like, once they got the Kickstarter money, like, Peter Molyneux kept promising things, and apparently a lot of his team was like, stop it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them eventually, like, just quit because of it. Yeah. Like, they were like, I don't want my name on this anymore.
I think Peter has a big problem with, like, talking too much, like, gets carried away, I'm pretty sure.
And I don't think he does it maliciously. Like, I don't think he's trying to lie. I think he's got, like, these lofty goals. And for a while, he was getting by on his reputation. So no one was putting him in his place.
Yeah.
He's released one too many bad games now. And
I'm fine with, like, developers being enthusiastic and, like, wanting to make, like, these expansive, like, experiments in terms of what you can do with games. I'm all for that. The issue is when it comes down to the consumer's wallet paying for something that you're not getting. You don't go to a store and buy an object under the pretense that it does something, and then when it can't deliver on that, you don't just like, well, I guess I have to deal with that. And like, no, you bring that back and you get your refund. And for a lot of these games, it doesn't work out that way. I'm trying to think, what else was it with No Man's Sky?
Well, if I could interject real quick back to No Man's Sky. Us as the gamers definitely overhyped it as like a whole community. I have to lay some of the blame in front of the games media as well. I remember the articles. People were praising this game like crazy.
Yeah.
Media outlets, big like IGN, the big ones like GameSpot and stuff, Polygon, Kotaku. They were all hyping this game up. I heard a few people saying like they liked it, but it was more like, they're like, it's okay.
Yeah.
And I think those people, if there were more of those people that, like, were maybe more realistic about the game and their expectations than wrote about it, I think us as, like, a community might have had lower expectations. I don't want to just, like, blame the whole games media, though. Of course, like, it's definitely some of it is on us as a community to, like, get more informed about that kind of stuff, because there was a bunch of gameplay and stuff out there for No Man's Sky where you can make a decision. But yeah, the games media hyped this game like crazy, and I think it was because of some of the promises that were told from I forget what was the main
Hello Games.
Hello Games, and there was one guy, like the director,
Sean Murray.
Mm-hmm. Yep, He's the main guy that was their spokesperson, saying a lot of the promises and stuff. So, I just wanted to quickly throw that out there, that games media got a little carried away, I think, too.
I think part of that was, and at least Hello Games Sense, that was also Sony. Like, the second Sony got the exclusivity deal, they just, like, were throwing that game in your face every time they possibly could. They were just like letting you know.
I think the lesson we as consumers can take away from this is, I've started doing it a lot more, is I pre-order far less. Unless it's a title, unless it's a franchise I'm super invested in, I don't pre-order. I don't see the point, like, because I'm gonna wait and see, because I've been burned too many times. Like, especially with MMOs. I remember we were you and I got caught in that cycle every time a new MMO would come out.
Yep.
We get super excited. DC Universe promises layers, sidekicks, alter egos, and then you get it was a hot mess on launch day.
Yeah.
And when you save it and wait, and you get the honest sort of reviews of these games from other consumers, then you get to make an informed decision, and that will teach the the developing world for games, to be more careful with what they promise. Because if people wait to get reviews, either from, if they trust an individual source, if they look for reviews online from other consumers, whether it's like on a Steam library and you can review it there on the shop, whether it's on like a shop, like a store, online store like Amazon with user reviews. If you wait for that, you'll get a much better idea of am I going to like this game. I will say that if you really want to try a game, but the reviews are sort of middling to bad, but you really want to try it anyway, do it. Sometimes, because it's always subjective, but I think if we pre-order less and allow ourselves to be more informed when it's something like new, I think it will encourage game developers to be more forthcoming with what people can expect from their game, and encourage less of this shiny presentation to get pre-order sales. And then so that, because, when they get this flack afterwards, it doesn't matter. They already got their money. And they probably already paid off the development for the game, so they don't care.
But Brandon, I need that exclusive helmet from the pre-order.
Pre-order at GameStop for the red and white Sparrow.
Ah, jeez. But yeah, I think before I know this segment has gone a little long, but so that we end on a little bit more of a positive note, why don't we each mention like a developer studio or a game in particular that we felt really, it was like if there was a discrepancy between what was promised and what was shown, it was acceptable, or a game that did a great job of showing us exactly what we could expect from the game before launch.
Sure. I mean, the obvious answer right now is Breath of the Wild, but we went on about that game for a long time. I'm going to actually share a great example of how to do Kickstarter right. And that is Shovel Knight. I'm having a hard time remembering. Yacht Club Games. That's
Yep.
Yacht Club Games who did Shovel Knight. So not only I'm pretty sure they met their goal for release. Along with Shovel Knight, everyone who backed that game got the full campaign, which was, I'm in the middle of playing it right now, but has fantastic reviews across the board. But along with that, they'll be getting every piece of DLC, which are whole other campaigns, for free. And now if you want to buy Shovel Knight, you get, it's called the Treasure Trove Edition. It's $24. But you'll get everything that they have planned coming out for it. And the game's super fun. It's expertly crafted. They made a simple but challenging product. Like, they knew what they wanted to make and they stuck to it. And I think they found, they had their base and they stuck to that. And once they had that settled, they went through and added, little extra things here and there. But they ended up creating a fantastic package that I think more than delivered for what you're paying for that game. Because when the King Knight DLC comes out, which I believe is the last DLC, I'm not sure, I'll have 4 different games.
Impressive. So I just want to make a quick note on Breath of the Wild. Nintendo, and I think Nintendo in general, when they show their games, it's always in-game footage.
Yeah.
They might have maybe they'll make a funny little cinematic sometimes. For Smash Bros had a lot of cinematics.
Yeah.
But that was obviously not in game, right? But whenever they show their games, they never really I think they actually run it on their console.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that. And with Breath of the Wild in particular, when they first debuted it at E3, it was a Wii U game running on a Wii U.
Yeah.
It looked different from now. It looked worse.
Yeah.
They improved it. So there's a telling sign there that was an early build of the game.
I think
they weren't polishing it.
This is footage of an early build, which
Yeah.
I always like, because that, to me, that's great, because if I'm already invested to watch this trailer, you probably already got me. But then if you say it'll probably look even better, I'll be like, ooh,
Yep.
my imagination will do far
Exact-
better than
yep.
your fake PC build of this is.
Exactly. So, yeah, I thought Nintendo and Breath of the Wild in particular was really good. I'd like to make a quick point for, I think indie games, most of the time, I don't think we see much of a problem from them
It's
doing that
marketing is
polishing and stuff. Yeah. When I think especially 2D games also, I feel like it's a lot harder to lie and soup up those games, like on a high-end PC, because a lot of those 2D games, it doesn't really take a lot to run them, you know what I'm saying?
And maybe that's sort of an unfair comparison to, because when it comes to 3D, I mean, for a long time, it was all about high-fidelity graphics and, pushing that. I think we're seeing a bit more of a transition into more stylized, to make things run a little bit more smoothly. But, yeah, I think you're right, for sure.
Like lighting, for instance, like, if you have a 2D game, like, it's a lot different, like the lighting systems and stuff like that. Like in 3D, you can like hit sliders, you know what I'm saying, to improve the lighting and stuff like that. But I don't want to dumb that down. Like, it is a lot more complicated than I just made it sound. But like a specific game that I sound like Ori and the Blind Forest for Xbox One, and it's also on PC. From the very beginning, that game, when they first showed it, it looked the same from the start to when it released. It looked beautiful. From, like, its art is amazing, and it was consistent from what they showed early to the final product. So that's what I really would like to see. I really appreciate game companies that just show us actual in-game cutscenes when they show off their game and stuff. And like we said before, I understand why companies feel the need to spruce it up and maybe run it on a high-end PC, but I definitely appreciate the latter.
Mm-hmm. I know for me, as if I wasn't a big enough fanboy as it is, but the one that sticks out to me most and in recent memory is Overwatch. That's a game that from the second they showed gameplay, that is the exact gameplay that we got. It was the exact same fidelity that we got. But what's nice is that Blizzard has a stellar cinematics department. So they get to still show off really pretty visuals, but never in a million years was it even considered that this is what gameplay was going to look like. The trailers imitate the game, which is fun when you think about the Dragon cinematic short, where you pretty much see all of Hanzo and Genji's toolkits in that cinematic, which is really fun. Like if you play the game, then you're like, oh, that's the scatter arrow. Oh, he just did his dash. There's the deflect. So that's really cool. But like there was never any illusions about what was promised. They were very forthcoming. It's like, this is a multiplayer only game. There's going to be no story mode.
Yeah.
We're going to be presenting the story in animated shorts, webcomics, and other outside sources. This is going to be like this is going to be capture point maps, King of the Hill, and it's just going to be, this is what it's going to be. And that's exactly what we got. And so when we dove into the beta and then in the game on launch, it was exactly what we were promised. And they've been so forthcoming with as they've been developing it. They were super open to, like, when people post forum threads, if one of them is addressing an issue that they feel is really important, they respond to it. Like, and not just a representative who's just like, we're looking into this issue, it's really important to us as a community that we make sure that you feel that your concerns are important to us. It's like Jeff Kaplan and Jeff Goodman and Scott Mercer. Like, these are the designers on the game who are on the forums, interacting with people. And so from, day one to now, they're active in that. And so I love that. And I think a lot of game studios are taking that cue. CD Projekt Red was really great with the development of The Witcher 3. Mm-hmm. Indie groups who are doing like Ori and the Blind Forest and Shovel Knight. And I think the closer in contact game developers become with the gaming community, we will get better and better results because there won't be such a disconnect between what gamers want and what developers are making. So we don't get another Assassin's Creed debacle where they run a franchise into the ground. But I think we've pretty much talked this topic to death. I'm sure there are other things that we could have talked about, but we hope you guys enjoyed. If there are other games and developers that you guys can think of that have sort of overpromised games and underdelivered, there are plenty of them. There's no way we could have gotten to all of them here. Even if it's a game that you like, but parts of it were disappointing. I know for me, Dragon Age Inquisition's item crafting and customization, while it was present, was super underwhelming compared to what I expected. But that's partially due to my expectations. Let us know down in the comments below, and let us know about the games that you like that have been totally true to what they've been promised. I am Brandon. This has been Marley and Carson on Checkpoint for the Geek XP. You guys have been awarded some Geek XP, and until next time, stay geeky, my friends.